All right, sick. So the first talk for today is going to be on Killchain and post exploit. So we already talked about the Killchain a little bit yesterday, right? So we're going to be doing a quick refresher. So for the recap, first part of the Killchain, reconnaissance. Next part, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, right? So reconnaissance, it's like harvesting email addresses, conference information, finding out the basic information about them. This is like our open source intelligence, things like that. Weaponization, that's coupling the exploits with the backdoor. So that's the part that the CWE zone. That's where we start writing our implants, start writing exploits, things like that. Next part is delivery. It's where operators come in. They deliver the weaponization package that we build. Exploitation, that's running the actual the delivered package, uh, hitting the vulnerability. Next part, installation, installing malware onto the asset so that we can get a foothold. That comes into the next part, which is our command and control, C2. Um, CWEs also build C2 the C2 programs as well. So we install malware on to the system, and then we get a C2 so that we can reach back to that system at any point in time. That way we have unlimited access to them. And then 7 is actions on objective. So that's hands-on keyboard access, trying to accomplish the original goals of penetrating that network.
For a second. All right, can you pop back to last, or actually the next one? Yeah, so talking about reconnaissance, so that's not just like the email address and conference information. You also got to think about all the other assets that you might have. This is a little different for like a nation state, right? So you've also got all of the collection capabilities of a nation state. So you might have people in country that are feeding information to some human source. You may have other things that are coming in as a nation state that you wouldn't exactly have. You may find out like the developers like Reddit account or Stack Overflow information, and then you can start to look at what kind of questions they're asking, understanding what kind of software that they're running on their systems. So like, this developer's asking a lot of questions about like Apache Tomcat, so they're probably running an Apache Tomcat server. So reconnaissance can get pretty large in that respect, and having good analysts is really important. And then with the deliveries, so delivery is not just like the infrastructure to send it over the internet and hit a box, right? That's also like dumping a bunch of USBs in somebody's parking lot. That's also, starting up a giant phishing campaign or a spear phishing campaign. Like, the developer's email address, so you can start to target them specifically with information that is specific to them. Maybe you get another email, and so you can send emails from somebody that they trust and know and might be more likely to open up one of the like exploit packages that you have. So like if you have an exploit for like a PDF reader or an exploit for like word macros have started to like crop back up again. So like that's like a big thing with delivery. And then actions on objectives. So like CWEs are kind of sprinkled out throughout this whole process, right? So we do some weaponization. There are CWEs that spend a lot of time doing a lot of the analysis, like reconnaissance work for some of our projects, basically all the way through to actions on objectives. So this is where like people start to talk about exfiltrating, like getting information off. So that'll probably be a lot of the C2 network. And then also like causing effects, which is like a big thing that they like to talk about, is like, building an effects package. So like you building software that affects something that's happening in the real world.
This is basically the same thing. I don't know what's on there twice. The scenario is never explained, so I'm just going to skip over that. So this is like a slide on each thing that we talked about, right? So recon provide expertise to target device selection. This is what's talking about where it's like more than just emails and conference stuff. It's all the specific details that you could get about that. You want to know everything possible. He keeps talking about CWEs being involved in this process. There's the vulnerability research team. They sit there and they look for vulnerabilities on systems. That's all part of that recon process. You got anything to say on it? I hit all the way down. Next part is weaponization. So the slide says CWEs own every step of that. They do exploit development, writing those modules for the delivery and exploitation, and they also make the implant development. So like this is creating that weaponized package. You can think of it as like a regular missile. We build every single part of that missile and deliver it to the aircraft carrier, basically, right? Next part, delivery. So this is like a part of this operation, this scenario, where you have these different parts. You can see how the delivery works, right? It goes from the operator, and if it's exploit delivery, somewhere to the internet, and then to the router. So this is an adversarial network. But the important thing to note, like I said, is that it's not just through the internet. It's dropping USBs, sending people phishing emails, things like that. Any kind of way that we can get onto this network is how we're going to try to deliver our exploit. So right, hits to the router. Delivery and exploitation. CWs can observe operations and provide guidance on how to use the exploits they develop. I believe they write a whole write-up on how the tool that they wrote works, the different options that it can have and use.
Yeah. So if you ever looked at like a piece of software and seen like the user guide that they provide for that software, like that tells you, it's basically a man page for your exploit. You say what every command does, what kind of trail it leaves on the network, which is really important for operators because they need to know like if I run this command, like I'm going to leave behind these like specific pieces of data. Like it's going to send like 3 packets. Those packets are going to be like very identifiable, or they'll just look like normal traffic. So it's important to kind of give them that information, or what gets logged on the specific target that you're actually going after.
Yep. And then our expertise in networking enables us to do troubleshooting. We own the tools. So whenever the tool doesn't work or if the exploit fails, we can provide instant support to the operation because this is happening real time. We got to go fast with it. And then a really important note is a lot of the CCF challenges that you guys will do, it's these very static problems. The real world is not static. So, we're going to be running our exploits on test machines, and we're going to try to duplicate the environment as best as possible. But ultimately, that is not realistic. And so it's being able to rewrite your existing capability to match the targeted device because it could have changed from when we did recon to the time that we wrote it, or from the time that we wrote it to the time that we're actually deploying it. So installation hits the router, and then it's like being installed in the router. That's what that little red diamond is. So if the exploit was successful, but a follow-on stage fails to install, CWs will continue to troubleshoot complex errors. And then if required, they'll write a new installation method to be integrated with the exploit, right? So this can happen. This is very realistic. Things change very quickly in the world of computers. All right, so then the exploitation phase, that's going onto the actual server that's behind the router so that we can hit like some system behind it. And then installing onto the server. So, right, it's exploit to install. And then once we get that exploitation and installation done on the server, then that's when we want to try to get our command and control on. That's what the green is. CWEs develop the command and control frameworks, right? So the software that runs our command and control servers, CWEs write that. They need to deeply understand the comms paths to allow troubleshooting. So what are ways that we can reach back to our original computer to say like, hey, this is kind of information that we're pulling off of the remote server. And then if a certain network is unable to use an existing comms path, the CWEs can rapidly retask to develop a way out. So, researching another comms path, trying to find a different way, opening something else up. And then actions on objectives. So we also are involved a little bit in this portion where the CWEs write effects modules. So if you want a specific effect on an adversarial computer, then a CWE can write a module that will do that effect that ties into like the command and control structure. And then they're able to understand any failures that occur and rewrite functionality as needed. And then if new effects are needed, then the CWEs can easily be tasked to meet that objective, right? So we're involved in every single part of the kill chain. And then here we see the actives on objective, right? So we got a command and control on this server, and now we're doing it on the rest of these. And then here we're hitting actions on objective. So like we got to the server, but that's not always the most useful thing. Sometimes we want a box that's sitting over here because this does something specific. This like runs their web browser, or this is their database or something like that, you know? Whereas this might just be the brains of the whole network. The 5 P's of post exploitation. So right, this is after we get onto their box, we've exploited them. The things that we want to do is we want to find persistence. So we need to find a way to maintain our access. It's where the command and control comes in a lot of the time, or backdoors, things like that. And then next thing we want to do is privilege escalation. So we want to elevate our privilege. Normally you're getting onto these boxes as a user or a limited access account. You want to find a way to break out of your limited access shell, or to go from a regular user to a super user to an admin somehow. Next thing is pilfer. So you want to steal things. There's many methods to do this. You can take everything off the box. You can look at logs. You can try to find if people have password files, things like that. Next thing is pillaging. You want to break things. So if you can break a service without it looking like you broke that service, that'd be great. And then pivoting, move from one box to another, because ultimately you want to enumerate the whole network so that you can see everything that is on their system. You want to be able to get to the other boxes, and then you'll do the kill chain all over again. If you want to look at more of like the kill chain from a corporate standpoint, MITRE attack is one way to look at it. The pyramid of pain. I don't know.
All right, yeah. So this is kind of an overview of like what makes things more difficult to identify as like a network defender. So like switching over roles and looking at like DCO. So the kind of trivial things that you can do to target a specific piece of malware or like an APT's like group is hash values. So like if you go back to like the old antivirus software, it's like the old McAfee, Norton, and all that other crap. They all used hash values. So they took like a piece of malware that was running on a bunch of systems. They built a hash value for it. Typically, they were looking for like a specific string inside of that malware, and then they just compare it against the hash values. And if they find it, quarantine and kick it off your box. And then as you kind of move up, these are more challenging things to identify as a network defender. So you have like IP addresses. So you know that like, oh, this range of IP addresses is all coming from like a foreign APT, and they're targeting our networks. So we just block all those IP addresses and we stop the attacks. Domain names, you may notice that like, oh, this group of like AWS servers is all coming after us. So we just block those. And then as you go up, this starts to get into more of like things that are much more difficult to find. So like network and host artifacts. So like the only way for you to identify that that piece of malware is running is that it leaves a specific set of network and host artifacts. It doesn't leave anything else. So you can see that like, oh, whenever they log in, they leave like this specific error because, the way that they run their implant on the back end, it didn't account for some error. So it like throws an exception every now and then. So you might see that. And then tools, right? Those are like specific like frameworks that they're using to actually exploit things. So you can see like, oh, well, they throw like a Metasploit interpreter or something, right? So the specific tool that they're using to actually get on the network. And then kind of the most difficult way to, or the most difficult thing to identify people by is like the tactics, technology and procedures. So like the way that they are actually getting onto the network. So like, oh, we noticed that this specific APT will always use an exploit to get onto your, Microsoft Windows Exchange server, and then they have a whole slew of tools and techniques that they use in order to pivot around through the Microsoft Exchange server to get over to like people's emails, people's passwords. They break in like the Kerberos server or something. So that's kind of what the pyramid of pain is. It's like how difficult it is as a defender to prevent some of these things, with obviously the TTPs being the most difficult.
You want to talk about the diamond model? No. Pyramid of Killchain. Yeah. And then this is basically one big diagram of the Killchain, right? So red team being hackers, the exploiters, blue team being the defenders. You can see all the actions that they take, right? And how it crosses over lines, right? So this is like the big internet, this middle portion. This is our network or what we're doing on our side. And then this would be the blue team's network, right? So recon and weaponization, that obviously happens on our side. We're not going out to them to do that. Like we can do that from our network pretty easily. The only thing that I would say you can't, that's a part of recon is scanning. So there's different types of scanning. There's passive and active. Passive is really not noticeable scanning that you can do of a adversarial network. Whereas active scanning, it'll most definitely show up that you're scanning their network or that someone is scanning their network. And that's the only part of recon that really requires hitting their network. Other things can just be done through like open source things like or information that you can get from other people. And then right, our delivery shows you different kinds of ways that we can get that. And delivery and exploitation are obviously very closely tied together. We can do that through email. It can be user driven. It can be an exploit. It could be a USB drive. It could be a macro. It could be some PDF file that has malicious code in it. And then once we get onto there, we do our installation, and that's when we do our foothold. Let's talk about backdoors. Those are very common footholds. And then we do our actions on objectives, and then we do post exploitation, right? So we pilfer, pillage, pivot, persistence. And then, after that, you pivot, and then you redo it over and over and over and over again. And that is all. Any questions?